In 2108, humanity began colonizing the stars. Their reach would eventually span a vast region of space known as the Inner Sphere.
In 2271, three nations that had independently formed due to the consistent struggles of the Terrence Alliance banded together under the Treaty of Marek, also known as the Articles of Unification. These governments, the Marek Republic, Federation of Orient, and Regulon Principality, formed the Free Worlds League. Ironically, this formation even predated the Terran hegemony. The newly formed government would effectively be considered a federal republic. The worlds and members under its tender mercies varied greatly from true democracies to theocracies to military dictatorships and more. Every member would have at least one vote within the League's parliament, and additional voting members were decided upon depending on the wealth of individual members themselves. The more in taxes a province or ward could provide, the more seats it had available. Redistricting of areas was handled by the League's Supreme Court every 10 years when that was an issue. How the representatives were chosen that would be sent to Parliament was dependent upon how the world's individual governments operated. Most were democratically elected, though more authoritarian regimes had their own processes. While most wards and individual member states were allowed, in theory, to govern as they saw fit, the League's parliament held supreme federal authority that had the ability to override local laws and regulations. The provinces of the Free Worlds League would grow exponentially, with initially only 15 being formed in 2571 to 154 by 3025. It would even see its numbers grow to 161 provinces by 3067. The new provinces would be increased either due to large political bodies failing and thus everything going into disarray and being carved up, or expansion of the Commonwealth itself. Looking back at the Parliament, it was established by the before-mentioned Articles of Unification that every 2 years Parliament would vote for a speaker who would then appoint ministers to oversee various agencies. These agencies included communications, defense, energy, foreign affairs, human services, justice, intelligence, trade, and taxation. All of these ministers, forming the council, would have to be ratified by the other members of Parliament. It would be the council that generally brought bills before the governing body, though in theory, any member of Parliament could do it. Within the treaty, 3 minister slots would have to be afforded to the original founding members, a source of constant internal conflict. Along with the Parliament, the League would additionally have the Lords of the Realm, non-voting members that comprised nobles who were planetary rulers or better. While these men and women would gain popularity and merit through the obtaining of status, most had little interest in assisting in any substantial way, as there was no ability to vote, nor real compensation. For many, it was considered a diminished role. The Free World League also had the military post of Captain General. This person was initially elected by Parliament so that they could engage in a war or ensure the defense of the League itself. The posting was not originally meant to be a permanent affair, but due to the formation of the Star League and succession wars, would become effectively permanent as it allowed the Captain General to stay in power for political reasons and for quote-unquote the duration of an emergency in times of conflict. The emergency never was clarified in the document that had been passed, which meant that the Captain General would not relinquish command in some instances, and the posting became a hereditary office that continued to accumulate power and responsibilities. Ironically, even though this posting would be somewhat authoritarian, it was still much better than other major powers. The Captain General and Parliament often found themselves at odds, with both sides vying for power. This power struggle negatively impacted member worlds, as more often than not they found themselves under martial law. Some or all of their rights would be curbed substantially. The original economy of the free worlds heavily relied on technological innovation and free trade. This created interesting, yet confusing times, as individual provinces retained their own currency for quite a while. The Free World League wouldn't adopt a federalized currency until 2353. It would be the creation of the Eagle, or M-Bill. This new currency could be used across its borders and with other powers. Though even with the creation of the federalized bills, individual provinces were still allowed to preserve their own currency. The laissez-faire mentality was a cornerstone of not only economic prosperity, but diplomacy for the free worlds. The League encouraged unfettered capitalism throughout its ranks to ensure dominance with rival powers. These policies allowed major corporations to gain power at the expense of citizens and was a large staple of the culture. This would change when protectionist elements gained power during the succession wars, but that's something we'll discuss at a later point. The League's first war was waged against the Stuart Commonalty, an independent nation that consisted of 5 systems and 6 worlds. A dictatorship under David Genovese, the man would refuse the League's invitations to join their great organization. The totally benevolent Free Worlds ultimately invaded the impoverished nation, with Juliano Merrick being elected Captain General. The Stuart War, as it was known, took only 4 months as David Genovese took direct control of his troops and, well, was an idiot when it came to warfare. He apologized for the inconvenience of resisting the totally peaceful Free World and was beheaded. The Draconis Combined would be proud. Never apologize in BattleTech, it'll just get you killed. The Free Worlds League continued to prosper and become a power in intergalactic affairs, so much so that the Capellan hegemony courted them to assist in the Capellans' attacks on the Sarna supremacy. The League ultimately enters the war with the Capellans in 2306 with the signing of the Ryerson Accord. This accord committed League forces to assist the Capellans in exchange for support in the League's territorial claims. Dinak Salaj was named Captain General for the conflict. The Captain General refused to appropriately respond with his Capellan counterparts, and even though the Capellan alliance now had a significant numerical advantage, victories continued to come at a great cost. The League would pull out of the Accords while House Merrick made their move for the Captain General, and Salaj was replaced by Alan Merrick. The peace and friendship that had lasted for the fledgling alliance between the two crumbled as Captain General Alan Merrick started engaging in military campaigns against the Capellans and was able to capture many of their planets. This would cause formerly disenfranchised nations to unite under House Lau, forming the Capellan Confederation. Alan Merrick was replaced by his son Peter Merrick as Captain General in 2395. Peter continued to execute a direct campaign against the Capellans. Unfortunately for the Captain General, the stronger Capellan Confederation counterattacked the League in 2398, the focus being on the Endurian system. Apparently, this was the most important system to both the League and the Capellans. Like, literally, metric tons of people will die for this system, but that's a conversation for another time. This attack signaled the 6-year struggle and beginning of the Age of War for the Free Worlds. During this time, Peter would suffer a defeat in the Kwamashu system. Fearing he could lose his military posting, the desperate men directly assaulted the Capellan capital of Cyan. This victory saw peace between the two in 2404. Even though the League had signed the Eris Convention, an agreement that would reduce the loss of civilian life as well as economic hardship by establishing a code of conduct, Peter continued to wage large military actions against the Capellans in Lyran Commonwealth. Parliament created an oversight committee of the Captain General and passed the War Powers Act of 2418. The War Powers Act substantially curbed Peter's ability to wage the bloody campaigns that he had against the enemies of the League. The bitter Merrick Brat stepped down and would refuse to serve as Captain General going forward, even in 2420 when the Lyrans were causing substantial harm to the League's interests. Parliament appointed Joseph Stuart in response to this, and the Stuart Captain General failed to stop the Lyrans and encountered devastating losses. The only reason the Lyrans were not more impactful in taking League space is largely due to the Lyrans' issues with the Draconis Combined at the time. This led to Peter Merrick becoming extremely overconfident. He felt that he was winning against Parliament, but unfortunately he would never see the repeal of the act as the man was assassinated in 2422. The Lyran Commonwealth once again attacked in 2427, and when Terence Merrick was asked to defend the League, he refused due to the same War Powers Act. As the Lyrans continued to crush the forces of the League, Parliament rescinded the Wars Power Act and Oversight Committee of the Captain General. Terence immediately took the military position, and while he was able to stop the Lyran advance, he was seemingly unable to retake the lost planets. Fortunately, Peter Merrick, the second, like it's the second Peter, we don't have a zombie Peter coming back, it's a different Peter, just the same name. Anyway, Peter Merrick number 2 would succeed Terence, and the newest of the Peters' offensives were much more successful. As the wars progressed positively, the League would pass the Liberation Act, which allowed conquered peoples to become full League citizens. This opened up new revenue streams and encouraged the peoples of the newly obtained planets to become League members instead of attempting to abandon their homes and flee to other powers. Peter would retire in 2352 and be replaced by Geralk Merrick. This Merrick utilized barbarous tactics against the enemies of the League, including that of the Lyrans. It would earn him the title of Geralk the Bloodthirsty. His reign came to an end during the League invasion of Lorik, where the Lyran Commonwealth Armed Forces deployed battle mechs for the first time. The man known as being bloodthirsty met his end as he was stepped on. While the Lyrans were able to stop the League's invasion, they could not push any advantage as the Lyrans had only enough battle mechs to stop the bleeding, not increase their standing. Dralk was replaced by a 19-year-old woman known as Simone Merrick. She would turn the focus of the League to technological innovation and improving education, looking at long-term economics. Though it's interesting, the military position that was meant to carry out the war would handle civil affairs. This was probably one of the reasons she was removed from her posting in 2475. She would also be known for the failure to bring the Capellan Confederation into a war to attack the Terran hegemony. She offered the exchange of Andurian and its surrounding systems, and it was incredibly embarrassing given how the system was at the center of many of the conflicts between the Capellans and the League. She would be replaced by Carlos Merrick, someone that most sources in lore call insane, and who wanted to conquer Terra. The Terran hegemony discovered the plot and launched a raid on the Free World's naval forces in the Orient that had been accumulating, completely destroying them. Brion would use this time to seize power from his brother in the League, forcing Carlos into exile. Brion quickly moved to negotiate peace with the Director General Theodore Cameron. Albert Merrick took over for his father in 2511. In 2528, the Second Andurian War was initiated with the Capellans, again focusing on Andurian. Director General Ian Cameron invited both combatants to the planet of New Delos, which saw the end of the Second Andurian War. The Treaty of New Delos would not only end that war, but settle disputes between the two that had gone on for years. Of course, the League and Capellans at this point seemed unable not to engage in war, so a third war of Andurian would occur and last for 5 years. However, Albert Merrick surprisingly agreed to give control of Andurian to Terence Leal of the Capellans. Of course, he would only do this if the man agreed to join an alliance with the League and Terran hegemony. This would be the initial formation of the Star League. Along with this development, Ian Cameron of the hegemony recognized Merrick's position, i.e. the Captain General, as the sole representative for the Free Worlds League. This escalated the Captain General position from a military one to a military and political position, giving massive amounts of power to the Captain General and preventing Parliament from removing it in the future. It would be ironic that the League was a founding member of the Star League, but would seem to only be negatively impacted by it. The Pollux Proclamation would signal the beginning of the reunification war, as the Star League was determined to bring every human being under the rule of the great governmental body. The Captain General of the time, Marian Merrick, led the invasion into the Canopus system. She would dedicate the entirety of her forces and focus on this system, allowing Parliament to run the Free Leagues for all intents and purposes. The Canopus system was taken quite easily, and the Free World League would invest heavily into the system and rebuilding its infrastructure. Canopians would also be afforded the same rights as had been deemed under the Eris Convention. Canopus would eventually gain back its freedom and self-governance. Unfortunately, the goodwill of the Free Worlds League meant that they would find themselves at a disadvantage when they had to compete with the now superior manufacturing of that system. And this would occur at the same time as the introduction of the currency of the Star League. The Free Worlds League now found itself with currency devalued and its corporations unable to compete with other companies utilizing superior technology. This spurred a depression in the highly capitalistic nation, which in turn would lead to calls for protectionism and extremist terrorist groups wanting change in the government. The terrorists would be quelled and free trade elements would ultimately prevail, though I'm skipping over a lot here. There is a lot more nuance to it, and we'll break that down when we get to it. All of this finally leads into the events of the Star League, which will be handled with great in-depth and nuanced breakdowns. Stay tuned as we take a look at the major organizations that would form the Star League. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.